One of the best hidden gems in Ireland has to be the magical Ballysaggartmore Towers here near Lismore. Tucked away in a lush forest, you'll find a pair of spectacular follies that lie in ruins and covered in vines, as well as abandoned lodges, a river and a waterfall. Although the follies look like something from a fairy tale, the tragic story surrounding this historic domain is anything but dreamy. It's a dark fable filled with cruelty, avarice and woe. Well, good morning folks, and it is indeed a nice morning. Short sleeves, t-shirt. It's overcast, it's humid, it's early morning. Today I find myself, or rather you might find me, or you find me, in West Waterford, Ballysaggartmore. I've done 2 different documentaries on this area. So this morning, I'm about to have a different approach. So I invite you all to once again don the boots and tag along with me, and let's discover an adventure through this area. Ballysaggartmore, near Lismore in West Waterford. I'm venturing through rather majestic, dense oak forests here, with a babbling brook, as they say in America, to my right. There's a stillness in the air this morning, a stillness that I love when I'm out and about and videoing. I have the bird in the backpack, so perhaps I'll delight you with some above the ground photography later on in the morning. But this is a fantastic place down here at Ballysaggartmore, and a place I've been many times, and I've said already that I've done 2 documentaries on the history and the agony and the bloodshed that have been cast around these parts in times gone by. I seem to have hit the jackpot again this morning as regards having this rich, green, dense forest to myself. Well, it appears that after my first 20 minutes of trekking through here from the car park. I made this decision 2 days ago to come here early morning and have another shot at making the 3rd and perhaps the final video. I love, as you know, I'm not into great big exposed mountains, although I do spend some time, quite a bit of time, videoing and so forth. But I love rich, dense, green forests. And here in Ireland, and particularly in West Waterford, we seem to be very lucky. Walking along here through this dense ancient forest with the sound of running water to my right hand side, it's so relaxing. The sound of the water and the odd chirping of wildlife in this canopy, it's awfully therapeutic because it's so early in the morning. There's a great benefit from getting the old cardiovascular system up and running and giving it a workout. Morning time is my time. The 2 opulent buildings known as the Ballysaggartmore Towers and Gate Lodge, though magnificent in their splendour, disguise the feelings that must have been aroused in the local peasantry when these incredibly Gothic and ornate structures were built. As in the case with all histories, an understanding of the time and place in which a structure is built can have varying connotations depending on our interpretation. The towers at Ballysaggartmore stand as a testament to brotherly rivalry and how differently two people brought up in the same household can view the world and their place in it. The story of Ballysaggartmore begins in the late 18th century when 8,000 acres of land was purchased by John Kiley from a George Holmes Jackson. When Kiley died in 1808, his lands were split between his two sons. His oldest son, also called John, inherited the largest share of the estate and the area of Strandkelly, further south along the River Blackwater. John proceeded to build a lavish castle, constructed by the Reverend brothers George and James Payne. When Arthur Kiley returned from the Napoleonic War, he built a house in the grounds of Ballysaggartmore. The house was large, but didn't really hit the heights of Strandkelly Castle, and so prior to his planned rebuild of the house, he ordered the building of the entrance tower, bridge and gate lodge that stand at Ballysaggartmore today. Arthur's building plans were always rumoured to have been stoked by his wife, who was so jealous of John's fortune. The ongoing construction work came at a considerable cost, and with further improvements planned, Kiley began clearing the existing tenants' cottages. The famine of the 1840s did not deter Arthur from his building plans, and unlike many landlords, he did not reduce or suspend their rent. On the 3rd of May 1847, a journalist from the Cork Examiner who was reporting on the famine relief projects in the area and the ongoing work with the destitute and orphaned was shocked by what he came upon at Ballysaggartmore. Arriving at Ballysaggartmore, an awful sight was before my eyes. I found 12 to 14 houses levelled to the ground. The walls of a few were still standing, but the roofs were taken off, the windows broken in, and the doors removed. Groups of famished women and crying children hovered around the place of their birth, endeavouring to find shelter from the piercing cold of the mountain blast, cowering near the ruins or seeking refuge beneath the chimneys. The cow, the house, the wearing apparel, the furniture, and even in extreme cases the bedclothes were pawned to support existence. As I have been informed, the whole tenantry, amounting with their families to over 700 persons on the Ballysaggartmore estate, are proscribed. A report in the same paper from January of that year couldn't have shown the more stark difference between the two brothers any clearer. Far different indeed is the conduct of John Kiley, Esquire of Strandkelly Castle, whose liberality to the poor of his parish is commensurate with his extensive property. He has, at present, and for the last season implied the people, is busily and solely engaged in diffusing comfort and plenty among them, so that there is no one in the parish of Knockenour who can say that he is hungry or distressed at the present moment. To evince his feelings still more, he has killed 3 of his best cows and distributed them amongst his labourers, with plenty of vegetables of all kinds. It is more than logical that Arthur's behaviour caused unrest amongst the locals and agrarian societies, and an attempt was made to shoot him. Luckily for Arthur, he escaped on foot. 7 local men were tried, found guilty, and deported to Tasmania. However, Kiley's short-sightedness led to his ruin. Without tenants, he had no income, and by 1854, Ballysaggartmore was being offered for sale through the encumbered estates court, but there were no buyers. Arthur Kiley died in 1862. Ballysaggartmore Towers are imposing Gothic-style buildings situated here near Lismore, in pleasant woodland walking and picnic areas. The towers provide a fairy tale setting which does not reflect the sad period in Irish history where extravagance and starvation lived side by side. They were constructed for an Anglo-Irish landlord, Arthur Kiley Usher, no later than 1834. He held an estate of approximately 8,000 acres, the majority of which was rented to tenant farmers, but he retained approximately 1,000 acres as a personal domain. The lodges were constructed on the main avenue leading to the family's residence, Ballysaggartmore House. The house itself was large, but of a very plain design, which was in obvious contrast to the lodges. This account also reports that they were built from designs by the head gardener, John Smith, and that the main entrance gates were forged locally for the sum of about £150. Local lore suggests that the grand entrance lodges were built as a prelude to the extravagant mansion that Kiley Usher intended to build but never did, as he ultimately ran out of funds for their construction, and that his building pursuits were spurred on by his jealous wife, who was obvious of her sister-in-law, who lived at the stately Strancally Castle. However, no contemporary account exists from this period. Ballysaggartmore Towers were the brainchild of Arthur Kiley Usher. He is a man remembered more for his appallingly cruel behaviour towards his tenants during the Great Famine than for his extravagant taste in property. The plans for his grand folly were largely inspired by his brother's impressive property, Strancally Castle. Arthur Kiley Usher inherited more than 8,000 acres of land in County Waterford. He left Ireland for a time to fight in the Napoleonic Wars, and on his return he built a relatively modest house in the grounds of his Ballysaggartmore estate. However, at some point in the 1830s, he decided that the house was not grand enough for his needs or reputation, certainly not when compared to his brother's mansion, Strancally Castle. It is said that These plans were largely driven by his wife, Elizabeth, who coveted a residence as grand as that of her brother-in-law. She was determined that their branch of the family would be seen to live as grandly as their near relatives. Thus, plans for an extremely large, somewhat pretentious mansion started to take shape. So I'm heading up here to a picnic table. There's a waterfall beyond. And I'm going to have a relax-a-voo here for a while. So I've been standing now and walking for around 2.5 hours. The old body, I think, needs a break. And you stop for a moment and you say, my goodness, this is so heavenly today. Now go back to the early 1800s. When the most notorious landlord of all, Kylie Usher, had his domain here, and his reign of oppression and terror ran rife in these areas. Today, it's a legacy to greed and a legacy to I want more. My dad used to say to me, Jim, much wants more. How right he was. So, the Towers at Ballysaggartmore in the most gorgeous of days. And today, the peace and the quiet that's here, probably the spirits of the people that were oppressed, kicked out of their homes, burned out, that couldn't pay their rent in the midst of a huge famine. Surely their spirits must wander and meander around these beautiful parts. So here is the waterfall. You have to do a bit of climbing and walking to get in here. It's pretty civilized today. You come here after a few days of rain, and this waterfall behind me, it's a lion's roar. Today it's a trickle, but the sound and the acoustics of running water here in a dense forest, it's just unbelievable. It fixes the mind, it fixes the body, it gives you something to think about. It puts you at peace with yourself and the world. And I think that's what it's all about. I said it in quite a few videos that I produced recently, when I dealt and touched on the Great Famine, or the Great Hunger, as it's known. But I just want to add one sentence here. You can detect a sadness, a sense of vengeance, a sense of regret. Why I regret, why I'm regretting, I don't really know, but I am. But let me tell you something, as an Irish race, we must be an awfully forgiving race of people to have put up with what the Irish put up with in impoverished times. And I don't wish to resurrect old sores and open old wounds and so forth, but nevertheless, the population was less than halved during the famine, and most of the effects of the famine could have been avoided. And I'm back here in Ballysaggartmore, the site of one of the most vicious landlords that reigned in these parts, West Waterford. And he also put a significant and brutal stamp and foot down on the Irish people that lived in straw huts. They were thrown out, burned out, kicked out, and probably murdered for the sake of a few shillings of rent per month. Money that could not be sourced. So from a peaceful and gentle and serene spot, that's my vent for today. We are indeed a forgiving nation. Now, once again, when I came back into the domain of the two follies, I've been hit by a coach load of tourists. So I have to kill some more time while these people take their 2 million pics and head off into distant locations. Nature abounds here in these woods. So I'm now making my way from the bridge down to the Grand Lodges. Another folly deep in the woods here at Ballysaggartmore. This place is commonly known as the Towers, and it's close enough to Lismore, where Lismore Castle is in County Waterford, West County Waterford. If you're coming from the North Cork area, you're coming through Fermoy and the Ballyduff. So if you're in these neck of the woods, give the Ballysaggartmore Towers a bit of your time. Spend some time here and walk around. I made the acquaintance of two Spanish students at the bridge, and they were asking me about the history, etc. of this place. And there's a rather shocking history attached to this place. And if you want to have a look at the other two documentaries that I made here at the Towers, go into my Facebook or YouTube page, Jim Owers, and you'll find two very long, comprehensive, in-depth documentaries on the history of the Ballysaggartmore Towers. If not, you'll be content with this one when it's produced, finished. Most, if not all, of the places that I take you on my wanderings and trekking and walking, I recommend. Perhaps you might have noticed that. So therefore, this morning is no different. I thoroughly recommend walking here in these dense, deep woods at Ballysaggartmore in West Waterford. Work began with the construction of the ornate and ostentatious carriageway, with equally grand gate lodge, complete with huge gates and towers. Once the gate lodge and bridge were complete, the couple turned their attention to improving the estate. This largely seemed to involve clearing the land of the sitting tenants and many of their utilitarian cottages. It was at this point that the Kiley Ushers' ambitious plans started to unravel. They quickly ran out of money, and it rapidly became clear that their dream of living in the grandest house in all Waterford was just that, a dream. Thwarted in their ambition, the couple were forced to live in the existing dwelling. We can only imagine how despairing and humiliated they must have felt at the realization that the impressive carriageway and gatehouse they had built would never lead to a grand mansion, one that they had dreamed of. This monetary crisis coincided with the onset of the Great Hunger. This terrible famine was without doubt one of the most devastating events in Irish history. Like so much of the country, the population in Waterford dropped by more than 50% between the years 1841 and 1851. Looked at in the context of these terrible times, the profligate plans of the Kiley ushers seem almost unbelievably crass and divisive. As the decade progressed, the few remaining tenants on the estate were not only slowly starving, but were also in no position to pay their rent. In direct contrast to many of his fellow landlords, Arthur Kiley refused to either suspend or reduce their rent payments. Rather, he used non-payment to justify evicting the tenants and demolishing their homes. He used the resulting freed-up land to raise livestock, which gave him a better return than his human tenants. In 1847, the Cork Examiner ran a story about conditions on the Ballysaggartmore estate. It did not make for pleasant reading. The reporter found houses that had been levelled, others without roofs and doors. Groups of starving women and children huddled amid the ruins, seeking shelter from the elements. Many had sold all their worldly possessions in order to live, including their clothes and even bedclothes. These were truly desperate people. Conversely, over at Strancally Castle, Arthur's brother John was very concerned with the predicament of his tenants, treating them kindly and with great compassion. Arthur's utter indifference to his tenants' predicament led to an outpouring of resentment among the wronged tenants. This peaked when a group of men tried and failed to assassinate Kiley Usher. The participants in the plot were sentenced to transportation to Tasmania, known as Van Diemen's Land, in 1849. As the worst of the famine started to pass, the country as a whole started to get back on its feet. The same cannot be said for the Kiley Ushers. Some would say that karma finally got them. Their fortunes stayed on a downward trajectory, not least because with no tenants left on their land, they had no income to speak of. By 1854, the estate was on the market, but a new owner could not be found. Perhaps potential purchasers were deterred by the recent shameful history of the place. In 1861, a buyer was finally found, and one William Morton Woodruff became the new owner of the estate. In 1862, it saw the death of Arthur Kiley Usher. The Woodruff family lived on the estate up until the turn of the century. The property was then bought by the Honourable Claude Anson, who had been working as a rancher in America. On his marriage to the Irish lady Clodagh de la Poor Beresford, the couple decided to settle in her homeland. However, their Irish dream did not last long, as the house burned down in 1922. Even had that not been the case, it seems that the Ansons were as reckless with their money as the Kiley Ushers had been. Claude had rashly invested the bulk of their funds on Russian bonds that failed in the aftermath of the revolution. The house and folly then stood near derelict and unoccupied for years, until it was eventually demolished. The front lodges, though, remained tenanted until sometime in the 1970s, though they too were ultimately abandoned. Today, the Ballysaggartmore estate and folly functions as a public park, with pretty walkways that wind through the woods. All that is left of Kylie Usher's extravagant plans is the gatehouse and towers. They serve as a timely physical warning against greed and foolish ambition, so starkly highlighted during the terrible famine years. Well folks, it's a gorgeous morning. It's a heavenly morning, and I have never been to heaven as yet, but I'm told I'm certainly destined for it. But it's a gorgeous morning. The sun now has come through the low mist and cloud, so it's you're getting the woods in their great splendor. A walk in the woods, as dense and as deep as this one is, collates all your senses in an orderly fashion and sets you up for the day. Well, it does for me anyway. It is just a splendid morning rather. It's not afternoon yet. I'm jumping ahead of myself. So, after an early start, cloudy, misty, dull sort of a morning, the golden orb came to meet me and greet me, and in doing so brought radiant shadows, colours and atmosphere to the landscape. So 3 hours and a little bit on foot, managed to evade most of the tourists, but no doubt there'll be the odd body present here and there in the finished product. But I'm sure we can do that too. We can put up with that. So they're entitled to be here as much as I am. So have a good day and a good weekend, and look after each other and take care of each other. Be kind to each other and take care on the roads. And thank you for all your likes, shares, comments. Bye bye for the moment.